Hello, friends. Welcome back to Halfway to Healing. I'm Sharna.
And I am Sam, and today we're going to talk about hypermobility and hip dysplasia. Predominantly, there'll be a little bit of talking about my experience with my joints, which is mostly around stiffness and arthritis.
Then we will dive more so into hip dysplasia, and that is, I guess, where I shine. So these are conditions that affect how my joints move, or more accurately, how they overmove, which leads to pain, fatigue, and sometimes feeling like my body just does not want to hold itself together.
And as I kind of touched on, my experience is very much the opposite with, the arthritis and joint stiffness. But we've definitely both had to navigate inside of bodies that don't move the way they're, in quotation marks, supposed to. So we're going to unpack today what it's like to live in wobbly, creaky, unpredictable bodies and how that impacts pain and daily life.
So whether you live with a hypermobile body, stiff joints, or something sort of in between, we hope this episode helps you feel seen, heard, and a little less alone.
Okay, so just right off the bat, Sharna, what on earth is hypermobility and hip dysplasia? Because I definitely had never heard of this until I met you, and obviously I've heard some of your stories about your knee. I think it was your knee dislocating randomly, but I thought it'd be good because it's definitely not a common thing that a lot of people know about, for you to just kind of explain what it is and maybe a little bit about how you were diagnosed as well. How did they find that this was something?
So hypermobility, generally people refer to it as if I'm introducing myself to someone, I'll just be like, oh, I'm double jointed, instead of, I feel like that's a term people more so sort of understand, rather than being like, oh, I'm hypermobile. So basically, it's a condition where your joints have a greater range of motion, so hyper, than what is typical. So this range is a lot more than what most people can achieve. And it can sort of have different variations. So being flexible, or I don't know if you've heard of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
I have.
Which is being just really bendy and stuff. But that's not necessarily the case with me. I am not flexible at all, but my joints can just hyperextend a lot more, if that makes any bit of sense.
I mean, definitely makes sense to me. If this isn't sensitive, please let me know. But in my head, it almost seems like in your range of motion and what I've seen, it almost appears to have for lack of a better term, cool party trick.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Vibe to it. And I recognize the severity, especially if you've got Ehlers-Danlos. I'm probably saying that wrong. Apologies.
No, same. Yeah.
These are very severe conditions, but, at least with what I've seen with your range of mobility, it's oh, let me do this cool thing. And you extend your arm out and it's bending, further back.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did they find it? How did they discover that you were hypermobile?
So basically, what I was diagnosed was hip dysplasia. And so I think more so now it's more common to check babies for it. And I'm not too sure what they do, because obviously I was, a baby. But I'm just doing some research just before this episode.
Are you telling me you don't have memories back that far?
I know. Who would have thought? So I did a little research of how infants are diagnosed with hip dysplasia. And basically doctors and nurses and stuff do a combination of physical examinations and tests, and just sort of moving the hips in certain ways. And I guess also through x-rays and these imaging devices, they can tell what it is.
Yeah, if you've got this, I'm just really curious. If you've got hypermobility and hip dysplasia, does that mean the hypermobility is predominantly impacted on your hip? Am I just making stuff up?
No, I actually don't know. That makes sense. My initial thing I was treated for when I was a baby was the hip dysplasia, and then the hypermobility just sort of comes with it. So my hips do crack a lot, so possibly. I just realised I haven't actually explained what hip dysplasia is.
No, that's all
so
good.
I might go down a little tangent and say what that is, because I realise I'm talking about this thing and I haven't actually explained what it is. So basically, when you're a little baby and you're in a womb, Why am I making it so formal? Basically, what it is when the femur, the ball of the femur, so that's your thigh bone, so the femur, the ball does not sit properly in the acetabulum, and the acetabulum is a part of your pelvis, which is generally quite deep, so it can hold that ball socket of the femur to keep it in place.
Yeah.
But with hip dysplasia, that part of the acetabulum, I'm just going to say the pelvis.
I'll put up a little diagram too.
That would be great.
Just so that people can see a little bit more visually where we're talking about.
Me using all this medical terminology might be a bit confusing.
No, but I think it's accurate, you know, and I know. Just to butt in a little bit,
no, go for it.
Back to your explanation, but I know from lots of medical appointments, like when I was, you know, especially with my hip, like they do. For knowledge, like sake, doctors will explain, and like physios and will explain it in like very, I don't want to say, I mean in medical terms, but like use like the correct names for the joints. So I think it's still important to use that. And I'll pop in when I do the editing a little video, like a little diagram for our viewers so that you can see, you know, where Sharna's talking about, because I personally think it's important to use the correct terms, but not everyone's going to know that. So I don't want you to stress about.
Okay. I'll try not to stress too much.
We can do things to help our viewers. Our listeners.
In regards to the last episode about anxiety, I'm trying not to be too anxious about using the terminology. So basically it's when the acetabulum is too shallow, and so the head of the femur is not sitting in that femur properly.
Oh, wow.
And so it can just basically slip out and dislocate. Yeah. And I don't know why, but it's very common in dogs for some interesting reason. Like you tell people like, oh, I have hip dysplasia, and people are like, oh, I thought that was just a thing dogs get. So I guess I am part dog. I don't know. I don't know why it's so common in dogs, but another dog thing.
So the hip dysplasia, now that we know what it is, was found in you as a baby through like scans, like mobility, like range of motion tests by doctors, and things like that. And I'm guessing you found out about this later on in life. Maybe not later. Like, no, I'm not thinking like last year or anything, but definitely like it was told to you by, I'm assuming, your parents?
Yeah. So I remember, just sort of when I was able to comprehend things, they were like, hey, Sharna, you've just had hip dysplasia. And there were like photos of me as a baby and stuff with my hips looking a bit funky. Yeah.
What's like the treatment like? Did you have to have surgery as an infant to like correct it or like make it a little more stable or like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I had something, I believe it's called like a frog splint. And so basically what that does, and so I had that on for, I want to say a good, like when I was a baby, because it's easier to correct things when you're a baby rather than doing it when you're like an adult and stuff and the bones have already grown and stuff. It's called like a frog splint or something, or like the frog position. And basically it's this sort of, like I don't remember it obviously because I was a baby, but it was this splint that sort of went around my waist and down to like my thighs and would hold my hips out. So my legs, I guess that's where the term like the frog splint comes from, because my legs were like in a frog position. And I do believe also what that does is sort of forces the acetabulum to deepen properly to cover the head of the femur.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so
maybe nice isn't the right word, but like that's cool. And it's interesting.
I don't remember it. Yeah, but I don't remember, but I do know that my mum told me. So I think I wore it for like 23 hours a day, so it could come off, and she would take it off to like give me a bath and stuff. And so there are like pictures of me as a baby at like the local swimming pool or something, just like in like the little toddler baby section with me with this splint on, and even photos of me just like lying on a bed with my hips sort of at this like 90-degree angle, just like because I was a baby, so I couldn't really do anything. But I was actually asking my mum about it the other day, and she said that I still managed to do normal baby things. Like I still managed to roll over with it on and sort of crawl. So I don't know how I did that, but I did. I don't remember it.
No, that's
but,
okay. I mean, how do these kind of, like, having gone through that as an infant, obviously your memory's not going to be there. But how does it kind of impact you now? I'm guessing the hypermobility kind of would impact you more now than the hip dysplasia.
Yeah.
But, like, is there things you have to, like, be aware of, or things you can't do, or...
Yeah, definitely.
Like, more nowadays.
Beg your pardon?
I said more nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said earlier, my joints are very hypermobile, so they often crack a lot, which you have noticed when we are working, especially my hips. I'll often... Well, not often, but sometimes if I've been sleeping, I'll wake up and I'll have this sort of not quite pain, but just sort of a bit of irritation in my hips. And I'm like, oh, my hips need to like crack. And so I'll just like crack them to like try and relieve that pressure, you know? And so the main issue I've had actually hasn't been with my hips. It's actually been my right knee. So just tying back into the hypermobility, when I was 14, I dislocated my right patella, which is your kneecap. And so...
Ouch.
Yeah, a very big ouch. And the crazy thing is because my joints are hypermobile, it did not take a lot of effort for my patella to dislocate. Basically, I remember it very clearly. I was doing a cartwheel and I must have twisted some weird way and it actually popped out mid-air. And so I like landed kind of funny and I looked down at my knee and I said to my friend at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, can you go get my parents? And so she went in and she's like, oh, Sharna's hurt herself. And parents being parents are like, oh yeah, just sort of dawdled out. And I'm like screaming in pain. So that's the main thing. And so obviously my brother is amazing in like emergency situations. He's very much like, his response is very much fight. I am very much a freeze person. So he actually called the ambulance and they gave me, I don't know if you've ever had the green whistle before.
Do you not remember when I dislocated my hip?
Oh, yeah. I was with you, wasn't I?
Yeah, you were there,
I'm
freaking
so sorry.
out.
Yeah, so they gave me the green whistle. And basically what they did is they just had to straighten my leg, which was so painful, even though I had the green whistle. And it just sort of popped back in. So it had dislocated laterally, so like away from the middle of my body. So it had dislocated out, which I believe is generally what happens most of the time. And so they just straightened my leg and it popped back in and like immediate relief. But obviously it had been out for a while because it takes the ambulance a while to get there. You know, they have a triage and stuff.
Were you on the mountain yet?
Yeah, I was in my backyard. Yeah, just like laying in the grass, ants like biting me and stuff. But it was given what I did my undergrad in, but I could not bear to look at it. I was like, this is too gross. So my mum got like a tea towel and like placed it over my knee because I'm like, this is too gross. And they still had to take me down to the hospital, even though they had relocated it at my house just to, you know, x-ray and make sure that they put it in correctly. And so then that was all fine and dandy. Well, not really. I was in a splint that basically went from the top of my thigh to halfway down my halfway down my calf. And so that kept my leg straight. And I think I was in that for about 6 weeks or so and just hobbling along. And afterwards, I had this splint on for about 6 weeks from the top of my thigh to halfway down my calf. And when I went to the physio, she like compared it and there was so much muscle wastage because I had not been using that leg, obviously. And so it was, you know, I had some physio exercises to try and sort of gain that muscle back. And then, you know, it was all fine and dandy.
Out of curiosity, because when I broke my leg, I had the cast on basically all of November, like forever, like maybe 6 months or something, because I destroyed my leg.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely destroyed it. And my foot is now like a whole shoe size smaller because the muscle wastage from being in a cast for so long. But I remember my physio exercises after I broke my leg was like just insane, because we were trying to build that muscle back, like trying to build the muscle back from not having used my leg in just so long.
Yeah. So got that splint off. All fine and dandy. You thought wrong. 2 years later, I was going to say bam, I dislocated it again. And this time, I think for me, the pain was so much worse. So what I was doing, I was outside again, brushing my teeth. I think I might have been like half dressed, and I was just running around with the dog. So just picture, just this half dressed kid, half in pajamas, half in clothes, brushing their teeth, running around with the dog in the backyard. Quite a sight to see. And I jumped over. We'd been doing, like, my mum's always been into gardening. So she'd been doing some gardening.
Yeah.
Like that weekend. And I jump over like the tiniest pile of dirt. And I can remember like the sound. I landed funny, and it I can very much remember the click it makes when it pops out. And I just fell straight to the floor. And I'm like, dislocated it again. And this time, my brother jumps straight onto the phone. He's so good in emergencies. I'm sad he doesn't live nearby me anymore. Love-hate relationship, love my brother, but like also super annoying. You would understand, you have 2 brothers. He gets on, calls the ambulance. And this time, while I was waiting for the ambulance, my nerves around the patella kept on spasming, trying to put it back into place. Yeah. And that, I don't know, I could like tell when it was about to happen. And every time it happened, I would just scream because like, it was painful being out. But when it spasmed, it like jolted things around a bit.
Yeah. It's like moving it
and it's kind of funny looking back now, but in the moment it was so like, what the heck? My neighbour had come over to like, I guess, help, but she didn't really do much help. She had an umbrella because it was a sunny day, but she was holding it over herself. And when I could tell that the nerves were about to spasm, I would start freaking out because I was like, oh, shit, they're going to spasm again. And she's like, you're just talking yourself into it, Sharna. Okay, let me just bonk your knee out and let the nerves spasm and see how you're just talking yourself into it. And so thankfully, when the paramedics got there, they gave me the green whistle again, straightened my leg, which, they had to cut my favourite pair of trousers. I was so disappointed. I loved those trousers. Little side note. And it popped straight back in again. Had to take me down to the hospital. Just like, I guess that's just regulations, They had to check that it was in properly. They, did like motor skill test things on me, like, can you follow this with your eye, making sure I didn't have a concussion or anything. And they actually took me to not normally, but the first time I went to the Gold Coast Uni Hospital, which in my mind is quite a decent hospital. But the second time they took me to Beaudesert Hospital, which I did not know was a hospital. And we were waiting, like, I was fine waiting, but there was like a doctor that came in was like, oops, sorry, we just had like 2 code blues. And I was like, what? So I was like, my goodness. And thankfully my mum had brought the splint from last time because they were like, we don't have any splints. So good thing you brought your own. I was like, excuse me, what? So my mum put the splint on and we sort of hobbled out, me with this abomination of a fashion thing, half in pajamas. My favourite pair of trousers had been cut into shorts, but then the other leg was still trousers. And they referred me to like a x-ray person. That's the term.
A radiologist?
A radiologist, that's it. Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Glad to see my medical knowledge is going to use.
I think it was about maybe 2 weeks later, we saw the radiologist. And it was actually then that we found out that my patella had actually fractured.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I guess because they didn't do that at the hospital. And so I still had this splint on, and they were like, well, actually, we don't use the splints anymore. You should have just been walking on it normally to get it used to that sensation again. And I'd been wearing the splint for 2 weeks, and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I had like a knee brace on top of a knee brace, and I was still like hobbling around on my crutches because my leg had gone kind of stiff, so I couldn't bend it very well.
Yeah.
And so the next Monday at assembly, I was like, look, I know there's nothing on my leg, but I can't bend this knee, because we had to sit in my assemblies on the cold concrete, like public school, right?
Oh, we had chairs.
You're like, can't relate.
Can't relate.
Can't relate. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. And so, yeah, that's been the main problems. Thankfully, it hasn't happened again. It was so weird because both times it happened like the last week of October, the first week of November, but like 2 years apart. And so when I got to year 12, I was very anxious around the last week of October, the first week of November, because I was like, oh. And they said if it did happen a third time, that they were going to have to look into surgery. But thankfully it didn't. But I do have to be careful. If I like pivot on my foot like really fast, I can feel it sort of move a bit. My neighbour's dog once ran into my leg, and that sent a big jolt up my leg and into my patella. And I was like, ugh. And I sort of like, it really, like nothing happened. I just felt it sort of move. And so I like hobbled back inside. I was like, ugh, that was kind of scary. But thankfully nothing worse than that has come of it yet. Fingers crossed. Touch wood.
Touch wood. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Everything for you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
No worries. Anytime.
So that's been the main complications I've had from it.
I mean, there's still really scary complications. Like, I remember dislocating my hip. You were there.
I was there. Oh, I didn't even know it was dislocated because you have such a high pain threshold.
I know,
you're like, oh, maybe I've just bumped it. I was like,
I dislocated it, but I didn't know until I saw my physio like weeks later. But I couldn't move. You know, I couldn't move.
I know.
And I was like, I'm like lying on the floor, like something is really wrong right now. And then I remember the ambulances got to me, and they're like, can you just like get up? And I'm like, I would have gotten up if I I would have. I would not. I was in like the most uncomfortable position on the floor that you could possibly.
You're just talking yourself into it, Sam.
Yeah.
You're just talking yourself into it.
And I'm like, there is nothing. I cannot, like, even you and my now partner, we were just friends at the time. Like, couldn't even really rotate me to a more comfortable position, because I was every time I like even moved a little bit, I was like, I wanted to scream, and you know how little how high my pain tolerance is. In fact, I think it hurt way more than when I broke my leg.
Oof.
And I really broke my leg. Like, I broke the tibia, the fibula, my ankle, and shattered the growth plate.
Yeah. You had a boat fall on it.
Yeah. It'll do a number on someone's leg.
Yeah.
And even then, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I crawled out from under the boat and stood up and walked to my parents to be like...
And you were like 10 at that time as well.
10. And even that, and my leg nearly came off. Like, I nearly lost my foot.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that. Oh, I just got a
sorry,
visual.
Sharna. I thought you knew that.
I did not.
Oh, yeah.
I just got a visual pop into my mind of just like your foot just like hanging off.
Don't be too graphic.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Are there like genetic factors to hip dysplasia or hypermobility? Do you know?
Yeah. So when I like had it, I guess the doctors and the nurses were like, who in your family has it? And my mum was like, no one. We don't know anyone that has it. And they're like, no, it has to be, I guess there is a genetic link to it. They're like, it cannot be any further away than like an aunt or a great aunt, I think they said. And so it wasn't until, I want to say about maybe 5 to 10, so maybe 7-ish years ago. So my mum's always had a terrible back. She has no discs left in her spine. She has a degenerative, I guess, disc spine thing. And one day, her and I were walking and her leg just gave way. She went to the doctor and she's like, something's going on with my leg. And like, even like lifting her leg to like press the accelerator on the car was pain. She was like lifting her leg in and out of the car. And so the doctors were like, okay, like she was always due for a hip replacement because she's got such degenerative arthritis already. And I'm not too sure how, thankfully I've never had surgery. I mean, I guess that I can remember. I know I had like some cysts when I was a baby removed, but public health systems, she was on the wait list for like 6 months, just hobbling around so slow with this incredible pain in her hip. And the GP thankfully was able to move her up to like a number 1 priority. And when they cut her open, her hip was actually dislocated, partially dislocated. So she had been walking on a partially dislocated hip for like 6 months. And when they were, I guess, giving her new hip, they actually found that she has the hip dysplasia. Right. And so that's where I got it from. And so I guess when my mum was born, these testing things weren't around. Yeah. And so it's kind of, I don't know, it makes me a bit sad to think about, because if she had have had this treatment when she was younger, like what I did, what would her life have been like, you know? Like, would it still have impacted her? Would she still have these medical issues that she has now?
I mean, it's
so just, yeah.
It's crazy to think about how far, even in 50 years, medicine has come. Even less than that.
Not even,
mom, it wouldn't be in her 50s when she had you.
No.
I think about it, but even in like 20, 30 years, how far modern medicine has come to test. You know, I know a lot of genetic conditions, if you catch them as infants, it's a lot easier because babies don't remember things, especially major surgeries and things like that. So that's really interesting.
Yep.
Go modern medicine, I guess.
Yep. We love modern medicine.
No, modern medicine is great. I can't think of anything else to ask that you haven't covered.
Yeah.
Look at you go.
Yeah, I might think I just might talk about, like, I guess if there's anyone that's pregnant, potential risk factors. For a baby that could be born with hip dysplasia. So I believe it's like firstborn females. So I wasn't firstborn, but I was the first female that my mum had. I'm the only female. I'm the youngest.
Sorry.
No, yeah, the baby of the family. And I think being breech, I don't think I was breech, but I think I was facing like a weird way, and they had to I remember my mum saying she had to like drink like freezing water to get me to move because I just would not move. And then obviously if you have a history of hip dysplasia, hip osteoarthritis, I believe are the main ones. Yeah.
No, that's, it's always good. I will say neither of us are medical professionals in the slightest.
No, exactly, yeah.
But, you know, so always, as always with these like conversations that we have, definitely consult, especially if you're pregnant. If you're pregnant and, you know, worried about it or have a family history, definitely talk to your medical professional and your treating team about it. Because I think that's just an important little note. Because we are not medical professionals in the slightest, and I think
Shana, not at all.
I think Sharna, you've done a really good job of like talking about it, you know, the best to your knowledge and your experience with it, but also providing a little bit of information, just for people who might be wondering how it could affect them, and you know, not to freak out any pregnant people who are Not to freak out any pregnant people who are now worried about it.
No, I think I don't think they can tell like when you're like not born. Yeah, during pregnancy. Yeah. So I think my mum was very, not adamant, but very much wanted me to have these, because I don't think they were like regulation infant tests when I was born, but I think they're now becoming like, they're just a regulation test. So my mum was very, I don't want to say concerned, but she knew about it. And I think I don't know if she requested or if the doctors are like, hey, what do you think about this? But yeah.
No,
I mean, and I have a normal life. It hasn't impacted me too crazy.
Look at you go with a normal
life.
Yeah,
just a bit cracky.
Just a bit creaky.
Yeah,
cracky.
Creaky, cracky.
I know I crack so much as well because being stiff is like, like it's that stiffness where you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know, and especially in the mornings.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that was good. I liked it.
Yeah. Thank you. Might wrap it up there.
I think so. Yeah, we didn't talk much about me, but I think Sharna talked a lot. Not in a bad way, by the way, but like talked a lot about, you know, what it's like, and told some really interesting stories.
Oh, thank you, Sam.
Next week's episode is about, we're going to talk about, it might be a little bit shorter, but we're going to talk about what lived experience really means for us. And, you know, possibly a little bit about how it's helped us on our journeys as well. So, you know, thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode. Yeah. And also, as always, subscribe, like, the socials. You know, we've got an Instagram. It's at halfway to healing with _ between. All the links are always in the bio for these things. And of course, we've got a website as well if you want to get the catalog. Or maybe you're listening to it on the website. I don't know why people are listening to this. But yeah, just like, share, follow, comment. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.